The world is shifting and fast. London is preparing to deploy troops to Ukraine after a peace deal, a move that could reshape Europe's entire security map. Trump cancels his long-awaited meeting with Putin. Total mistrust, zero progress. And now, in a stunning tweet, the US president gives the green light for British and French missiles to strike deep into Russia. The balance of power is breaking, the West is uniting, and Putin's empire is cracking from within. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zoroslava Kolesnikova, and right now we're uncovering how diplomacy collapses. London prepares troop deployment ready to enter Ukraine after peace deal. A major statement from the UK Defence Minister John Healey says London is preparing for a possible deployment for British troops to Ukraine once a peace agreement with Moscow is reached. It is the beginning of NATO's direct presence in Ukraine or a signal to the Kremlin that the West is ready for any scenario.
London is already preparing for the possible deployment of troops in Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement between Kiev and Moscow. This was stated by the UK Defence Minister John Healey. It is also reported that the United Kingdom is ready to allocate more than £100 million equivalent in Ukrainian hryvnias. This amount is more than 5.5 billion hryvnias for the possible deployment of their troops in Ukraine.
First and foremost, this is meant to demonstrate that these countries are ready to contribute to peace. But I think for now it feels like this is more talk than action, because if we recall initially what Emmanuel Macron was talking about, what France was saying was about sending troops. And there was even an idea that this would happen during the full-scale war, but in order to help the Ukrainian army not be distracted by those areas where there are no active hostilities, meaning the border with Transnistria and the border with the Republic of Belarus, troops would be deployed there. This would be presented as the direct involvement of European countries in the war.
Healey spoke about the efforts of the UK and France to form a coalition of the willing consisting of 30 countries, which in the future is preparing to deploy forces on the territory of Ukraine.
Well, regarding the fundamental principle that the Europeans made a commitment to uphold from the very beginning, it's essentially to give Ukraine as much as necessary for as long as necessary, that is, as much as is needed for as long as it takes, and for however much time is required. Unfortunately, as is sadly well known and obvious to Ukrainians, this did not come true. And the saddest part of this story regarding this potential armed group of peacekeepers, or what in Europe is sometimes called boots on the ground, meaning on the territory. Unfortunately, this follows the same principle. That is, they make a lot of promises, which sounds great.
The British are convinced that the forces sent to Ukraine will help ensure the security of the country's air and maritime space. The British minister's plan provides for the training of military personnel to participate in multinational forces that will secure Ukraine's borders. However, this is only possible if Russia agrees to end the full-scale war.
When President Macron and Keir Starmer came together in London back in August, it was actually in September, to gather as many supporters and allies as possible, making sure we included everyone we could. In the preamble of this treaty, the agreement of this initiative, there were some very cunning and very dangerous words. That is, to help either with specific armed forces on the ground or with some other kind of material assistance. And this unfortunately, allows most of these European partners to, of course, express their support for Ukraine in its struggle. But specifically when it comes to troops, when it comes to military assistance in the form of involvement in the conflict, unfortunately, this allows them simply not to fulfill it.
In addition to post-war planning for aid to Ukraine, Britain is also helping our country right now. Just this year, it was announced that the British have provided a record amount of aid totaling £4.5 billion. Additionally, together with the United States, the United Kingdom has shown leadership in coordinating a broader group of countries providing Kyiv with weapons and financial support. In September 2025, the United Kingdom provided Ukraine with military assistance amounting to more than $1.3 billion. These funds were allocated from frozen Russian assets. The country's governments noted that this made it possible to supply hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of air defense missiles, spare parts, and to sign new contracts for the maintenance and repair of equipment and vehicles.
Britain, which understands perfectly well that after leaving the European Union, it needs something that will allow it to return to the global game. And so essentially by helping Ukraine, this brings the United Kingdom back into the ranks of global players, which is what it wants. And that's why even something as simple as them more demonstratively lifting restrictions on the use of their weapons is significant here. And providing it to Ukraine is also, in my opinion, an argument in favor of Britain's growing role in global politics. And that Ukraine's victory in this war will not only be a victory for Ukraine, but also a victory for the United Kingdom, which Britain understands perfectly well.
This Friday, October 24th, a meeting of the Coalition of the Resolute will take place in the capital of Great Britain, London. Preliminarily, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is also expected to join the meeting.
Trump turns against Putin, green light for strikes on Russia. A political earthquake in Washington. The meeting in Budapest is cancelled. British and French long-range missiles get the green light for strikes on Russian territory, and new sanctions hit Russia's biggest oil giants. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and now plans to crush Putin's war machine. What's really happening inside the White House and why this moment could change everything?
The cancellation of the meeting in Budapest, the green light for strikes with long-range British and French missiles on Russian territory, and sanctions against the two largest oil companies in the country, the gas station. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin. What is really happening in the White House?
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready to negotiate. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the green light was given from the Oval Office, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee sprang into action as well. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate itself admits that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day across the ocean, it seems they've turned their backs on Putin. But as analysts point out, it's too early to award Trump the hero medal. Donald, as before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as quickly as possible along the current lines. He wants to pin the badge of a great peacemaker on his lapel and shift all subsequent problems onto the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic. That is, Ukraine wants peace. It said, yes, we stop at the line of demarcation. So Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia does not want that. So according to Trump's logic, pressure needs to be put on Russia, which is what happened in the form of these sanctions. At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we're ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift sanctions and offer some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he will be able to reach Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing. Let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, failed to take into account the most important thing, the logic of Putin. The dictator doesn't care about the impoverishment of millions of Russians or the stagnation of the economy. He has his own priorities, and he isn't going to change them, neither under the stick nor the carrot.
He lives for war, you understand? The future of the Russian economy and oil prices, none of that bothers him at all. There will be money for the front, there will be money for the army, there will be money for recruiting soldiers, and those very soldiers will be found. What they've been finding for 3-4 years already, they'll keep finding more. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything is going just fine. And as for what might collapse someday, that people will live badly, that there won't be any gasoline or something else, he doesn't care. They'll find gasoline for the tanks and everyone else will just have to walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone, not just Ukrainians. He doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative turn across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't even worth paying attention to. On the contrary, not a single word from any official representatives. And most likely in Moscow, they will pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, they don't have any kind of response yet. Medvedev is playing the role of the bad cop and is being rude to Trump. But as we've already seen, over the past year, Putin and Trump haven't been rude to each other. They are being polite, just teasing each other a little. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements or insult Trump and say that we're now enemies. He'll probably just say something like, well, he got a bit carried away, we'll talk, we'll work things out. I don't think we're in for anything like him coming out crying and saying, well, that's it, it's over for me. I renounce power. I lost the war. The new sanctions have crushed me.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to roll everything back, and will Trump fall for empty promises and stalling tactics? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike the meeting in Anchorage, the US president realized much faster that the desired showdown wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. India and China, according to the media, will be forced to give up Russian black gold.
Trump-Putin summit cancelled, total mistrust between Washington and Moscow. Is Putin outsmarting Trump again, or is Kremlin diplomacy just stuck in this old trick? The long-awaited Trump-Putin summit planned for 2 weeks from now has been postponed indefinitely. Even the preliminary meeting between Lavrov and Rubio set on October 23rd has been scrapped. Is this the end of US-Russia dialogue or just another round of Kremlin manipulation?
Is Putin fooling Trump again, or is Kremlin diplomacy simply preserving tradition? The so-called summit between the Russian dictator and the American president, which according to the latter was supposed to take place in 2 weeks, has been postponed indefinitely. The preliminary meeting between the two sides, represented by Lavrov and Rubio and allegedly scheduled for October 23rd, has already been cancelled. According to CNN, during a phone conversation between the representatives, it turned out that they see the solution to the problem in completely different ways. After this information appeared in the media, Lavrov himself responded. He essentially confirmed that the Russians, as before, are sticking to their position.
I want to officially confirm that Russia has not changed its position compared to the understandings reached during the lengthy negotiations between Putin and Trump in Alaska. These understandings are based on the agreement that was reached at that particular time, which President Trump very succinctly and clearly expressed when he stated that what is truly needed is a long-term, sustainable and lasting peace, rather than simply an immediate ceasefire that would ultimately lead nowhere and accomplish nothing. We remain fully and unwaveringly committed to this formula, and we continue to stand by it as the best path forward for achieving a meaningful and enduring resolution to the conflict.
Peskov also joined in echoing his Kremlin colleagues' fabrications. They say, how can you implement something that was never agreed upon?
You can't postpone something that was never set in stone. Something that was never set in stone. Neither President Trump nor President Putin ever specified exact timelines. Preparation is needed, serious preparation. You heard statements from both the American side and ours that this may take time. Therefore, no specific dates were ever established from the very beginning, at any point.
At the same time, vague statements are coming out of Moscow, not in favor of Putin's visit to Budapest. They say that the trip is unsafe for the aging dictator, since there is a risk of assassination by intelligence agencies. The journey to Hungary is a long one, and in general, the Poles, who have said they could arrest Putin, are capable of terrorist acts.
It is possible to assume that disagreements arose between Lavrov and Rubio. They were unable to reach an agreement on some important issue that needed to be brought to the leaders for approval. This is absolutely realistic and possible. But on the other hand, there may be other underlying factors at play here. This is more in the style of Russian diplomacy, to create confusion once again, make the situation uncertain, and then boldly and courageously go to the meeting to resolve certain issues. In other words, to give up yet another minor and non-essential position.
Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky is planning to attend the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, which partners are hastily organizing in London on October 24th. The media, citing a draft of the European Union's conclusions, report that at the meeting, European leaders will confirm their decision to provide financial support to Ukraine over the next 3 years using frozen Russian assets.
Obviously, the expectation is not that we will be fighting for 3 years. The expectation is to put pressure on Russia at these negotiations. That's the real calculation. The main goal is to force Russia to listen to Ukraine's demands. to say, look, Ukraine has 140 billion plus its own funds plus resources from our partners. Altogether, this could amount to 200 to 300 billion over 3 years. These are extremely comparable sums to what Russia currently has.
In addition, according to media reports, Italy will soon join NATO's initiative to purchase American weapons for Ukraine. Previously, its authorities were opposed to this. With the frozen Russian funds, Ukrainians also plan to purchase 25 Patriot systems from the United States, which will protect Ukrainian cities from attacks by the Russian army.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you believe that truth must be louder than Kremlin lies, like, comment and subscribe. Want to stand with us on the information frontline? Become a sponsor and help us expose war crimes, uncover propaganda and defend Ukrainians' truth worldwide. Stay informed, stay strong and stay with Ukraine.